Okay, welcome back to the Scripture Reeducation Project. I'm your teacher, Sister Scholar. So we're going to continue with the House of Shem. It was starting to get long on the previous video, so I figured I split it up just to kind of give you a break because it was a lot to take in. So we're going to pray, and then I'm going to give you a little summary, and then we're going to move on. Most High, we thank you for this day. Abba, we thank you for your love, your goodness, your mercy. We thank you for all that you do to cover us and keep us. We thank you for all the tests, trials, and endurance that it builds us within us to be able to withstand all the things that are coming towards us. We ask for your blessings in abundance. We ask for your grace and your mercy. We ask for your wisdom and your word. Everything that you have put within us, help us to let it bloom and blossom forward so that we may be trees planted by the rivers of water and not be moved, that our faith not be shaken, that we not be deterred to the left or to the right, but that we will walk the straight and narrow path in order to attain your kingdom. Thank you for your glory and the victory that we have over all the circumstances in our life. We thank you for your son and all that he has done in order to be able to redeem us back to you. Thank you for your spirit and your wisdom resting within us to guide and lead us back to you. Please forgive us of all of our sins and transgressions, not only our sins and transgressions, but those of our forefathers. Thank you for our families. Thank you for our loved ones. Thank you for any growth, any personal growth, any trials that we are withstanding right now, that you are building up endurance in us so that we can move forward and be stronger. Help us to weather every storm. All that you have given us, and we thank you for it right now in abundance and in grace and in gratitude and in thankfulness. By the authority of the Lamb I pray. Hallelujah, so it shall be done. Okay, so quickly, we kind of were discussing how the children of Shem have certain overlaps with the children of Ham, which were the Negroes that we were talking about, which are the children of Ham. And then we're just going to continue on with that. We're going to do more reading, and I know you're thinking like, like that SpongeBob thing, like,
oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But like, we got to read. Like, there's no way around it. There's no audiobook or anything. Reading does something to your brain. We got to read. Okay, so we're going to keep going.
Evolution is based on four major ideas. None of them have ever been observed. Number one, that life comes from non-life. We have not one single example of life coming from non-life. Number two, that all the life forms that we have today came from single-cell life forms. Many people do not know that while we do have single-cell life forms that we call bacteria, we have no two-cell life forms. We don't have three-cell life forms. We don't have four-cell life forms. We don't even have five-cell life forms. That is, we go from single-cell bacteria to complex life forms. So there's no evidence that all life comes from single-cell life forms. The third postulate of evolution is that time and chance drive evolution forward, of course, and time works against evolution. The chance of one simple 100-unit protein coming together by accident this is a very big number. Time and chance make evolution absolutely impossible. The fourth postulate that evolution is based on is that what we see today, minor genetic variation in species, is evidence of macroevolution. So because cats are different colors, dogs are different sizes, that means that fish turned into cows. And of course, we know that that's not true because Mendel proved that all the genes that exist today, you can shuffle them around, but there are no new genes that work.
All right, so we're going to actually touch on Darwin for a second, on Charles Darwin. So Darwinism came out in 1859. So he brought out his book, Origin of Species. So we're going to read a little bit about Darwinism. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection proposes that species change over time from one common ancestor through inherited variations where individuals with advantageous traits for their environment survive and reproduce more successfully, passing those traits on, causing favorable characteristics to become more common in the population over generations. This descent with modification explains the diversity of life, suggesting that natural selection, the fittest individuals to thrive and multiply. Key principles: variation. Individuals within a species naturally differ in their heritable traits, meaning like beak size or speed. 2, inheritance. These variations can be passed from parent to offspring. 3, struggle for existence. More offspring are produced than can survive due to limited resources, leading to competition. 4, natural selection. Individuals with traits better suited to their environment, adaptive traits, are more likely to survive, find mates, and reproduce. 5, evolution. Over generations, these advantageous traits become more frequent. altering the species and potentially leading to new species from a common ancestor. So let's talk about this just for a second. So they're trying to say people groups are different because of evolution, and we already know that's a crock of crap. But if you know anything about Darwin, he was a Freemason and part of the occult stuff and all that stuff, blah, 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 right? If you don't know, go look it up. I'm not going to like dwell on that here. So at the same time, too, this is how those in high places and wickedness think, because a lot of them are taught by the fallen and they're taught by the Nephilim. This is one of the things that it's saying. It's saying right here, it says at the number 4, natural selection, individuals with traits better suited to their environment. Meaning if you can adapt to your environment, they make it seem like it's only happening in the wild, and if you can adapt, they will create traps for you not to adapt, in safe places for you not to adapt and just be consumers and not produce anything, which will cause you not to adapt. So when things are happening around you and you need to move in a certain way and pivot in order to be able to progress to survive the new wave of things that are coming, they will create places of comfort so that you will not adapt, and it will only be those who are fit to move forward. And they'll say that it's your fault, which it is. I mean, they make the trap, but it's your choice if you decide to get caught in it. They'll make these spaces for you to be trapped inside of a video game, or trapped inside of reality shows, or trapped inside of eating all the time, or trapped inside of doing frivolous things that aren't building anything, and you're supposed to be learning and growing and developing new skill sets, but you don't. So their version of evolution isn't just because they're trying to make it seem like the Bible is a farce and that they know better, you trust the science. Yeah, that's one layer of deception. The real layer is that's what they really believe about all of us.
To this moment, I want to share it with all of you.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in this.
Should the human race survive?
Yeah.
I don't care what nation you are. That's what they believe about all of us, is if you cannot adapt to what it is that they have created, you are not fit to continue. How often do they talk about, there's too many people, we have to depopulate? And it's just like, why?
Key for me, when our foundation first started up, it was focused on reproductive health. That was the main thing we did, because I thought, population growth in poor countries is the biggest problem they face. You've got to help mothers who want to limit family size have the tools and education to do that. And I thought that's the only thing that really counts. Well, then I came across articles that showed that the key thing you can do to reduce population growth is actually improve health.
There are plenty of empty open places that are habitable for people that nobody lives in. Why does it have to be that we got to reduce the population? Why is it that you're like, we got to do this or we got to do that? They create these safe spaces. They create these places where you have to rely on them so that they're going to make you compete for resources. They want it to be a Hunger Games. They want it to be a survival of the fittest situation. And if you find yourself caught in those scenarios, at this point, if you're not learning and growing and going in prayer and asking the Father to teach you how to escape these things, it's your fault. Okay, so we're just going to kind of read this little part at the bottom. It says, this is the mechanism driving evolution, often summarized as survival of the fittest. Organisms with beneficial traits are naturally selected by the environment to leave more offspring, while those with less helpful traits do not survive as well as pass theirs on. So when they're sitting here telling you that, this your body, your choice, and you can do whatever, and you out here being reckless and having all these abortions and stuff, you're not going to make it. You haven't left anything behind. You haven't built anything up. You're being selfish. And you're not going to survive the next wave of things, because instead of sitting here and building yourself up, being spiritually fit, being a vessel for his spirit, and all those types of things, you decided you was going to play around and not do what you're going to do. Like, these things they're not teaching us these concepts just to waste time all the time. They're teaching these concepts to indoctrinate us so that we act out certain behaviors unconsciously. All right, let's keep going. All right, so we're going to read this book. So Darwinism was 1856, I think it was, I said. Whatever year it was, right? It was 1859. Okay, 1859. So this book comes out in 1867, which is almost a decade later. And it says the Negro. What is his ethnological status? Is he the progeny of Ham? Is he a descendant of Adam and Eve? Has he a soul? Or is he a beast in God's nomenclature? What is his status as fixed by God in creation? What is his relation to the white race? So this was he went by the pen name Ariel. It looks like it was published in Cincinnati, and I think someone of English descent wrote a response to it. So we're going to read a little bit of the response. And we're also going to look at what nomenclature means as well. So nomenclature is a set or system of names or terms as those used in particular science or art by an individual or community, etc. The names or terms comprising a set or systems. And then we're going to look at some of these thesaurus definitions, which is classification, codification, glossary, phraseology, terminology. Like, how do we classify these people? Is pretty much what the question came into being. So because we're on the back of Darwinism, now in order to classify these people, we have to make sure that we dehumanize them in order to make it seem valid as to why we treat them the way that we treat them. Okay? This was all very well thought out. I'll give them credit for that. Okay, so this was the response to that, which was written by Robert A. Young, D.D., which I think he has I think he was like a master or a doctor of divinity or whatever. Okay, so his response says, I just got to zoom in just a little bit. His response says, the Negro belongs to the genus Homo. He is a descendant of Adam and Eve. He is the offspring of Ham. He is not a beast, but a human being. He has an immortal soul. He may be civilized, enlightened, and converted to Christianity. Okay? All right, we're going to keep going from there. All right, so this is just a snippet of what he said. He said the Negro, we're just going to do some highlights. The Negro is before the public. Thousands have read it, talking about Ariel's writing. He said the Negro is before the public. Thousands have read it. Some believe it. A few have been damaged by it. If the Negroes read it and believe it, they are ruined. Somebody ought to answer it. So pretty much the writings inside his paper, The Negro, were so egregious that he was saying that it was changing the mindset of certain people as to how they are to treat the Negro. And not only that, he was saying if a Negro should ever read it, it would do a lot of damage to them. The reason that we were reading things like this is because of things like that comment in the Nelson's Illustrated Bible Dictionary, where it says, well, you know, all of Ham's descendants were immoral and, you know, wicked and all those other it doesn't say that anywhere in scripture. It just says Canaan was cursed. He got to be slaves to people. That's all it says. It doesn't say all of Ham's descendants were cursed. It only says Canaan. So when you're applying something to an entire group of people and you're saying it's okay to treat these people in a particular type of way because, oh yeah, because they're cursed, that's why we can treat them this way. We can treat them terribly because they're cursed, and they're trying to justify it. That wasn't scriptural. Like, they manipulated the scriptures into saying something that, or manipulated people into thinking the scripture said something it doesn't say. Okay? Now, here's the thing. I learned that when I was a child. When I asked about slavery, because that's what our seminary teachers were taught. When I was a child and I asked, well, why did slavery happen to us? I was told because we're the descendants of Ham, not Canaan. Ham. That's what I was told. We're descendants of Ham, and because of, you know, that curse and slavery and all that other kind of stuff, that's why it happened. When that's not why it happened at all. Not even in the slightest. Okay. But we're going to keep reading. In some respects, Ariel is a remarkable, so this is his commentary about Ariel. Ariel is a remarkable writer. He talks about scholars, candid scholars, intelligent scholars, about Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, about versions, translations, renderings, about the Septuagint, the Vulgate, and Common English Bible, ethnology and whatnot. Surely after all this array, one would suppose that he understood the right use of language, grammar, rhetoric, logic, etc. Nay, Ariel, you do not know the difference between propitiate and expiate. You do not know that a verb agrees with the subject in the number and person. Your sentences sprangled about without the least unity. Sometimes your premise has no conclusion. Sometimes your conclusion has no premise. When you talk natural science, it is not in the language of the books. You cannot even quote scripture correctly. So you ought never to write another paper. So one of the things is it's like going back and forth in the comments in the 1800s. But one of the things that he's pointing out to him is he was like, sometimes you're saying that it's a singular person, but it's really multiple people, and he's going back and forth. But we say all that to say this. This gentleman wasn't happy about the paper, but at the very bottom it says, we are of English and German stock. No ancestor of ours ever lived north of Mason's and Dixon's line. We have no relative on that part of the planet. We do not believe in the social equality of the Negro. We do not believe he knows how to handle a vote. We are disenfranchised. Still, we believe the Negro is a descendant of Adam and Eve. Now, we're going to look at the Mason-Dixon line just for a second right here. Okay, so he was saying that they didn't have any forefathers that lived in those areas, but at the same time, he had certain beliefs about the Negro as well. He's like, oh, well, I agree with this aspect of it. I'm just not saying that they don't have a soul, but some of the other things that you said I agree with. So, of Adam and Eve, that he is the progeny of Ham, and that he is a human being and has an immortal soul. So then he quotes Ariel, and he says, Ariel says on page 4, it will be admitted by all and contradicted by none that we now have existing on the earth 2 races of men, the white and the black. Varieties would be the word used learned of this age. So he was saying that pretty much it's only white people and black people on earth. That's it. That's all there is. Excuse me. So now he refutes that statement. He said, let us take up a common geography. According to the form of the skull, of the color of the skin, there are 5 distinct varieties in the human species. This is just what they're saying. I'm not saying it's what it is, but this is what they're saying. The Caucasian or European, the Mongolian or Asiatic, the Indian or American, the Negro or African, and the Malay. Caucasians include almost all the nations of Europe and their descendants in America. Also, the Hindus, we'll keep going. Persians, let me see here. Okay. The Hindu, the Persians, and Arabians in Asia and Abyssinia. And we're going to look at Abyssinia for a second. So Abyssinia is also Ethiopia. Ethiopia, a native empire in Eastern Africa. Capital, Addis Ababa, conquered and annexed by Italy, reconquered by allies. Also, Abyssinia, the ancient name for the vast region south of Egypt. And then if you want to pause to read the rest of that, I'm not going to read that right now, but we're just going to focus this right here. So he's saying that there are only, 5 groups of people or whatever. But then it goes on to say Egyptians and Moors in Africa. The skin of the Caucasian is generally fair, but there is a wide difference between the color of the Caucasian of North Europe, and him of Egypt and Abyssinia. Now you see that it's not saying the Caucasians and the Egyptians look the same, but I just want to point that out. All right, climate, food, manner of life may produce its difference, and that's not really what produces the difference, but that's just what they believe. Mongolians include Siberian tribes, the Chinese, Japanese, Indo-Chinese nations in Asia, Finns, Laplanders, Turks, and Hungarians of Europe, the Eskimo of North America. The skin of the Mongolian is generally sallow or olive tint, but there is a great difference. Okay, so we're going to look at some of these people. That's Cambodia. This is Indonesia. This is Thailand. Okay. So it says that there's a great difference between the white Hungarian and the dark Chinaman. So not how people look today, or not what they just put on Google, how the people actually look when you're going outside of the city and the mass land, and going like into the small tribal areas. These are what the people look like in mass. Okay. Here again, we see the influence of climate and food, but that doesn't have anything about to have to do with it. So we're going to skip down to the bottom. The Indians include the tribes of America except the Eskimo, because the Eskimo is a different group of people. The skin of this variety is a sort of reddish brown or copper color. Because Caitlin says the Mandans of upper Mississippi, there are many of these people whose complexions are as light as half-breeds, and among the women especially, there are many of whose skins are almost white, with the most pleasing symmetry and perfection of the features, with hazel and gray and with blue eyes. And in regard to their hair, it said it's generally, and then it's talking about it as straight. I'm going to talk about this for a second. There are people who are considered, air quotes, Negroes, that have very light skin, and their hair is very straight, and they have gray, green, hazel eyes, and they are not mixed with white people. My mother-in-law was one of those people. Both of my husband's grandmothers were those people. They could pass for white, but their parents were not white. Their grandparents were not white. Their great-grandparents were not white. Okay? So we have to get certain mindsets of race out of our mind, because we were mistaught race in a lot of aspects. Because the assumption is because you have a certain hair texture or a certain hair color that you automatically are assigned to a particular group. That's not necessarily how it is, okay? So we're just going to keep going. Let us take up a common geography. According to the form of the skull and the color of the skin, there are 5 distinct human species. Oh, I think I read that already. Wait, maybe not. Okay, we'll just read it again. The Caucasian or European, am I going? Yeah, I think I read this already. Let's see. Yeah, jump back on me. Okay. We're going. Oh, okay. So we're just going to skip ahead. All right. The individuals of the fair tribes whom we examine have the features and the statures of smooth, straight black hair, which characterize other Indians, and would be impossible to take them for a mixed race, meaning that these people don't look mixed. You can tell that they are who they are, okay? Like the descendants of the natives and Europeans, saying the descendants of the natives and Europeans look different than this group does. It says, on the other hand, Dr. Morton informs us of other tribes of the American Indians that are black. He says the Karus or the Karaus, who are almost black, inhabit the 5th degree of the south latitude, and yet blacker Californians are 25 degrees north of the equator. Here again, you will not fail to observe the influence of local and temporary causes in changing in complexion. They keep thinking it has something to do with the climate. It doesn't have anything to do with the climate. It's just the people are the way they are. Okay? But he's saying that there were black people in the Americas, and he's saying there's black people over in California. So one of the questions I always had was, well, if slavery wasn't on the West Coast, why are there so many, air quotes, black people over there? They didn't do that much migration. Just saying. We're going to keep reading. Doing Table of Nations, right? Trying to pinpoint who's who in West White. All right, so Malaysians include the tribes inhabiting the islands of Oceania, together with the natives of the Malay Peninsula. The skin of the Malay is tawny or dark brown, sometimes almost black. His hair is coarse, lank, and black. Forehead low and broad, mouth large, nose short and broad, and the eyes obliquely set. The Negroes include all the Aboriginal tribes of Africa, south of Abyssinia in the Great Desert, together with those of Australia, New Guinea, and New Caledonia. The skin of the Negro is jet black, the hair woolly, or as Ariel would say, kinky, head long and narrow forehead, low, eyes large and prominent, mouth large, lips. Okay, so it's telling you right here where their territory was. It's saying Australia, New Guinea, New Caledonia, and then it says south of Ethiopia, and then the Great Desert, which will be Sahara. Like I said, they're two different distinct groups. And we saw how the people in the Americas were categorized as well. And I'm sorry to have to go through all this, but I got to prove a point. All right, he said, thus we see the Caucasians are white, the Mongolians are yellow, the Indians are copper colored, the Malaysians are dark brown, the Negroes black, a pleasing variety of colors. All these belong to one great family of man, proving that unity in diversity and diversity in unity is the law of nature. And then at the very bottom, he says, as Ariel has given the ethnological status of the Negro, we will give you Ariel status in zoology. He says the gorilla frequently steals the Negro woman and girls and carries them off for wives. Dr. Bachman says it should be observed that nothing is known of the gorilla but a skull. We therefore know nothing either of, I don't know if I went forward with this or not, but we're going to have to talk about this for a second. So we're going back to the skin tones that were listed, right? So brown meant dusky or dark, inclining to redness, and then we're going to skip down. Red means the red people, the red children, the aboriginals of America as distinguished from the whites. Now this bottom part right here, where it's talking about, you know, the gorillas stole women and that's how these people came into being, that takes us right back to Darwinism. They're trying to prove it by demeaning one culture, and then they're trying to bring their Darwinism into it to try to validate it. Like, that's really jacked up, but it is what it is, right? So this is what this particular writer chose to do. And the other one is doing his best to try to, you know, bring a different perspective to it. Okay, so we're going to recap here to the house of Shem. So Shem has Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. And Elam becomes the Persians, Ashur, Assyrians, Arphaxad, Chaldeans, Lud, Lydians, and Syrians. And then just keep that in the forefront of your mind. We're going to read some more. Okay, so we're still reading out of, we're reading out of the Britannica World Language Dictionary. And like I said, that was from 1954. Just for context, World War II occurred between 1939 and 1954. Now this dictionary was published after that time period. So one of the things to remember is certain things have changed because of certain events in history. So if you're asking, well, Sister Scholar, why are you even talking about World War II? We're not talking about World War II in depth, but we're talking about World War II in context as to why certain things and names and people groups have changed, because what applied originally is now being applied to different people groups, is the best way I'm trying to say it. I'm trying to be delicate with it. But different people groups aren't originally who they were, and the events of World War II made those things happen. Do your own research on your own time. I'm trying to keep this channel up as long as possible. So, I mean, some stuff I'm just going to have to kick the door in on the certain topics, but I'm trying to be delicate with certain topics just because I don't, you know. Anyway, people are sensitive about stuff. Nobody wants truth these days. So whatever. Okay, so we're going to read some of these definitions for as it pertains to the people of the house of Shem. And then, so we're going to start here. So it says Semite, originally a descendant of Shem, one of the people of Caucasian stock now represented by the Jews and Arabs, but originally including the ancient Babylonians, Assyrians, Arameans, Phoenicians, etc. So it says Sem is also, you know, like it's a, another way to say Shem. Is Semitic, of or pertaining to the Semites or to any of their languages. Semite or, number 2, any Semitic language. And then right here, Semitic languages, a large family of inflectional languages possessing a rich and ancient literatures, and the first fully developed alphabets, including ancient Babylonian, Assyrian, Chaldean, Canaanite, Phoenician, Punic, Sabaean, Gez, etc. And also ancient, modern Aramaic, Hebrew, and Arabic languages, modern Syriac and Maltese, and modern languages of Ethiopia. Semitics, the scientific study of the language and literature of Semitic peoples. Semitism, Semitic word or idiom, Semitic practices, opinions, or customs collectively. 3. Any political or economic policy favoring the Jews. Okay, so we're going to read this and break this down just a little bit. So right here at the very top, it says originally. Anytime you look at these books and it says originally, it means that was what the definition was, but the definition either no longer means that, or it now extends to mean that and more, or now it means something completely different. Okay, so it's saying right here, one of the people of Caucasian stock. Now I think we've already talked about where the Caucasus Mountains are, and the Caucasus Mountains pretty much part of it. Not saying it's the only mountain range or because a lot of their lands were divided by mountain ranges as well as rivers, but the Caucasus Mountains was one of the ranges that divided some of the lands of Shem from some of the lands of Japheth. So when it's talking about these Caucasians, it's the Caucasian people. Okay, and these are the areas that they lived in. Now, it says originally a descendant of Shem, and then it talks about, the Caucasians, the Jews and the Arabs. But then it tells you again, it reminds you again, but originally it included the Babylonians, the Assyrians, Arameans, and Phoenicians. Now, the Assyrians and the Arameans are of the house of Shem. The Babylonians and the Phoenicians are out of the house of Ham. And we were talking about Shem and Ham's overlay. But it's talking about the language that they spoke was a Semitic language. And then there was another point that I wanted to make. Okay, so right here, when it's talking about the languages, you see it says Babylonian, which we've already discussed that, Assyrian, which is Shem, Chaldean, which is Shem, Canaanite, which dwells in the lands of Shem, because we know the Canaanites took over the lands of the Israelites. Phoenician, same thing with the Canaanites. They're like a subgroup of them. Punic, Sabaean, and Gez. I'm not really sure those nations too much. But you see right here where it says Aramaic, that's Aram, as in the son of Shem, which is where we get Syria from. And we'll read that and discuss it as we go. And you see Ethiopia is listed there as well, because there's also an overlap. Like I said, it's always an overlap with Shem and Ham. And then when we go down to the very, very bottom, you see how it says Semitism in the third definition. It says any political or economic policy favoring the Jews. But there was nothing to suggest that prior to that. So when someone tells you you're anti-Semitic, ... fill in the blanks how you may. Okay? But we're just going to keep going with this. I already know it's going to be a thing. Okay, we're going to keep going with this. All right, so now we're going to look at the next definition. So now Holy Land is just this dictionary just said Palestine. And we know Palestine is another name for Philistines. Okay, so Elam, we know that Elam is one of the sons of Shem. It says an ancient country between the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea. So if you want to look at an old map and kind of lay out where that is, if that's really where it is, because I know a lot of these maps aren't what they were, but I'll give you some maps when we get to the spread abroad that you might be able, if that's your thing, if geography, especially biblical geography, if that's your thing, I'll have some maps in the spread abroad episode for those who want to take that further in their study. All right, so Assyria, an ancient empire of Southwest Asia, capital Nineveh, right? And then it also says Ashur, because that's where the Assyrians come from. And then further down it says Assyrian, of pertaining to or characteristic of Assyria or its people, a native of Assyria or the Assyrian Empire, the language spoken by the Assyrians, and then Assyriologist is a student of Assyriology. Okay, and then we're going to keep going from here. All right, Syria, an Arab republic in Asia Minor north of Palestine under French protection. And then the capital of it is Damascus, a territory mandated by France to be in the League of Nations in 1922, comprising of republics of Syria and Lebanon in the districts of Latakia and Dajbel, I think, Druze, and then it talks about that. But we're really looking at 1 and 3. An ancient country comprising present-day Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and adjacent districts of Western Asia. And then right here, Syriac, the language of the Syrians belonging to the eastern subgroup of the Aramaic group of the Semitic languages. And then of or pertaining to Syrian, ancient or modern, a native of Syria, especially one of the native Semitic people of Arabic, Phoenician, or Aramean descent, one who is a member of the Christian church in Syria. So we're going to look at this part right here again, where it talks about the Aramaic group of the Semitics, the children of Aram, as we know previously from when we did the chart breakdown for the houses of Shem. The children of Aram are the Syrians. So I'm going to take it there. So if you see certain events happening in the world to certain groups of people are really in their homelands, but people are telling them they need to migrate out of their homelands, and to do so, they're doing it by force and also invoking other countries to help them do it in a land that is not their own.
Question is, can you pick up or what I'm putting down? Round the town, funky clown.
Okay, that's just, I don't know if I'm gonna decide to make it clearer or not, but like I said before, it's important to do the Table of Nations so you don't find yourself on the wrong side of history. Sometimes the people that you're cheering for to be contained, for lack of a better term, are the very people who are actually in the right, and the people who are defending their own homelands. What you see isn't necessarily what things are. Okay? All right, so we're going to keep going from here. All right, so Syrians are children of Aram, and then just like when people were talking about an Aramaic New Testament or in the Aramaic, it's originally the children of Aram. It's a Syrian language, which takes us to the next one. So Chaldea, it says same as Babylon. So you know what we're going to have to do? We're going to have to look at Babylon too. Chaldean, a native of Chaldea, one of an ancient Semitic people of the Tigris and Euphrates Valley who conquered and ruled Babylon, hence Babylonian. We're going to skip down. We're going to go to number 3. Well, actually, no, we are going to read number 2. One versed in the occult learning of the Chaldeans, an astrologer, hence a magician, and they were very good at astrology. Very good at astrology. We'll see it as we go when we read about the birth of Abraham. Very good at astrology. All right, 3. Even Abraham himself was good at astrology. All right, 3. The ancient Semitic language of the Chaldeans. And then we're going to read down here at the bottom where it says Chaldee. A Chaldean. 2, Eastern or Biblical Aramaic. And we were just talking about Aram and Syria and all those things. There's a lot of overlap. It says it's an erroneous use, but it's a lot of overlap with these nations. All right, so Chaldea is also another, it says the same as Babylonia. So we're going to actually look at that definition really quickly. All right, so right here it says Babylon, an ancient city on the Euphrates, famed for its luxury, capital of Babylonia, from about 2300 BC. Hence, any place regarded as the seat of luxury and vice, which that's interesting. 3, any place of captivity, an allusion to captivity of the Israelites by Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. And 4, Scarlet Woman of the apocalypse. So those are very interesting definitions. The original definition is the top one, but some of these other ones are also interesting, that it's considered also a seat of luxury and vice. So a place of luxury and where you have vices, where you have certain things that I guess you're addicted to, or certain things that cause you to be into an illusion, or not live in realities, things that cause pleasure, make you most sad. Okay. Any place of captivity as well. And it's an illusion. It alludes to the captivity of the Israelites by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. So we're going to keep going from here. I know this is a lot of reading, but like we got to get back to reading. Like we really do. Because a lot of things get slip by us because what we don't know, right? We perish for lack of knowledge. All right. So real fast. Iraq, an Arab kingdom occupying the basin of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And remember, we were talking about we were talking about the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers when we were talking about, I think it was when we were talking about Chaldea or Syria, one of the two. But it's the same area. And then it says in Mesopotamia, square miles, capital Baghdad. Baghdad is also called Mesopotamia. And Iraqi, it says of pertaining to the Iraq, its inhabitants or their language, a native or inhabitant of the kingdom, of the kingdom of Iraq. The dialect of Arabic spoken in Iraqi. In Iraq. My brain. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, in addition to that, we're going to look at Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia, a region and former country between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. So the seat of Mesopotamia is like where everything kind of started. And we'll discuss that as we go, if it comes up. I mean, it probably will, but we'll just keep going because there's a lot of information. All right, Iran, the kingdom of the west coast of Asia. And then it gives the size of it. And then it says the capital is Tehran, officially called Persia until March of 1935. Okay, so it was called Persia until March of 1935. Why do you need to change the name? Okay, but we're going to keep reading. Belonging or relating to Iran or Persia. Now, a modern Persian. So when we see these words like modern, there's a difference between an ancient people group or language or place and a modern people group, language or place. A modern Persian, a member of the ancient, see now they have a sub-definition, a member of the ancient Persian or Iranian race. The Indo-Iranian or Aryan group of languages, embracing Afghan and Pashto in the east, and in the west, Avestan, Old Persian, Middle Persian, Scythian, etc. Modern Persian, Kurdish, and other ancient and modern tongues of Persia, Caucasia, etc. Okay, and we're going to look at another word just because of that definition. So remember, it says Indo-Iranian or Aryan. So Aryan, one of the prehistoric people who are said to have migrated into Europe and India from Central Asia, and who are conceded to be the parent of Sanskrit stock of the Hindus and Persians, originally the Iranic or Asiatic division of this people. Hence, all right, second definition, specifically the Indo-Iranian. The Aryan languages, specifically the parent language of the Indo-European family. So that's what it becomes, but that's not who they are. Okay, and then we're going to read at the very bottom, of or pertaining to the Aryans or their languages. And then the second definition is in Nazi ideology of pure Caucasian strain, or specifically having no Semitic strain. That's what they called Aryan. But right here, it's saying that the Indo-Iranian is the Aryan, which is of Semitic stock. So it's the change of a word. It's a hijack of a word because it has to apply to an agenda as we go, okay? And we'll kind of touch on it, but who they were calling Aryans in post-World War II aren't who Aryans originally were or are, okay? you can really just, I mean, honestly, you really could just say original Aryans are original Iranians. But they have to change things in order to be able to make things fit the way that they need it to fit in order to do things that they're trying to do. Okay? All right, so we're going to keep going from here. We're going to keep reading. All right, so this book is Negroes in the New World by Sir Harry H. Johnston. Okay, so this book is from 1910, and just to give things perspective, slavery was abolished in 1865. And remember, Darwinism kind of comes, kind of within a 20-year span of that. So let's just read some more, and we're going to look right here. Okay, the Negro in the New World. Yet the ancient Negroid elements in these European populations, and you see them right there at top, talking about France, Ireland, Spain, Eastern Mediterranean, all those places, right? Yet the ancient Negroid elements in these European populations seems to possess slightly more affinity with the Asiatic Negroes or with those of northeastern Africa than with the typical African Negroes or the Bushmen of today. In spite of these very interesting discoveries in Grimaldi caverns, the oh my gosh, today with the words, the deductions to be drawn from the rest of our limited knowledge to point rather to India as the original birthplace of the Negro subspecies. Just as India or Central Asia may have been the evolutionary center of the entire human genus of the sapien species. I'm going to pause there for a minute and I'm going to read it again, and I'm going to explain why we're reading this again. In spite of these very interesting discoveries, right? We're going to skip down. Deductions to be drawn from the rest of our limited knowledge point rather to India as the original birthplace of the Negro, and then it says subspecies. Just as India or Central Asia may have been the evolutionary center of the entire human genus of the sapiens species, they're saying everybody came up out of India or everybody came up out of Asia. And I know you're like, well, why does that matter, Sister Scholar? It matters because what you call the Middle East today was originally called a part of India and a part of what we call Africa. I mean, not Africa, India and Asia. Because when they settled after the flood, they all had an origin point, and then they spread out from there. That origin point was pretty much in Mesopotamia, which falls in the lands of Shem, which these people descend from. These Indian people, some of these Asian people, and this particular genus of Negro that they're talking about, they all come from the house of Shem. So when they're saying that everybody comes from Africa, no, if we're going off of maps, really everybody comes from where Shinar would have been, where Sumer would have been, where Babylon would have been. Everybody came from there and branched out from there. How are we getting everybody came from Africa? Excuse me. I don't trust most of these maps anyway, but I'm just saying, if we're going off of a map that we've been given, how did everybody come from Africa when everybody came from Babylon? All right, let's keep going. All right, and have witnessed the branching off of the straight-haired, hairless bodies, yellow-skinned Mongolian who immigrated northward towards central to eastern of the Hyperborean Asia. And Hyperborea means North Sea, strong wind, cold wind, or Arctic wind of the North Sea or something like that. I can't remember. And to America, and southward to Malaysia and Pacific, and perhaps again to America via the Pacific archipelagos. The only difficulty in adopting the theory that the Negro originated in India is the presumed absence at the present day of any pure Negro type in continental India, though there can be little doubt that the Dravidian tribes of Negril, thank you, Hills, and Kota, and Karumba, and Irula, and Badaga, and of the forests of the southwest of Madras and Mysore and Cochin and Tabakor and Kedar. Sorry, I gotta scroll down just a little bit. And Panian and Palua and Puliar and Canyon have a preponderating element of Negro blood. Many of these people are dark colored with kinky or curly hair and are pronathous and flat nose with thick everted lips. The Adamanese are Negroes, and you can look up those people. They live on an island. Okay, we're gonna skip down here. Assuming then that the Negro subspecies originated in the Indian Peninsula, we can imagine and see this type of dark-skinned, spiraled-haired, flat-nosed man turning eastward as well as westward, invading Burma and Malay Peninsula and Archipelago on the heels of the retreating asteroid and securing as their exclusive home the Andaman Islands. They were probably exterminated in Nicobars by the Mongolians that followed them. To this day, the dwarf Negro people survive in the Far East and Samang in the forest of the Malay Peninsula and the Edda and the Philippine Islands. We're going to keep reading. All right, so we're going to go from here. All right, now we're going to talk about the Negro subspecies. Are traces of the passage of the Negro people through Sumatra and Borneo in the islands of Timor and marked so in New Guinea. Though they have mingled with asteroid and have produced a well-marked Papuan race. The existing populations of the Solomon Islands, of New Ireland, and of the Hebrides are much more Negro-like in physical characteristics. In fact, perhaps the people of New Ireland are most nearly akin to the African Negro of all the Asiatic and Australian peoples. Asiatic Negroes also seem to have entered Australia from New Guinea and to have passed down the eastern part of the continent till they reached then the peninsula of Tasmania. Not, of course, without mingling with the asteroids. There is a Negroid Melanesian element in Fiji as far west as Hawaii archipelago and among the Maoris of New Zealand, and in much less degree in Burma, Annam, Hainan, Formosa, and the Ryukyu, Kyu Islands in southern Japan. Why are we reading all this, Sister Scholar? Elamites from the House of Shem. The Elamites in Mesopotamia appear to have been a Negroid people with kinky hair and to have transmitted this racial type to the Jews and Syrians. There is a curliness of the hair together with the Negro eye and the full lips in this proturative of Assyria, which conveys the idea of an evident Negro element in Babylonia. Gonna keep reading. I'm gonna go down a little bit. Okay. Quite probably the very ancient Negro invasion of Mediterranean Europe, of which the skeletons of the Alps Maritimes are vestiges, came from Syria in Asia Minor on its way to Central and Western Europe. It is possible that in or on the verge of Arabia, the ancient basal stock of the generalized Negro parted, dividing into two great streams of a divergent immigration, one to proceed to Europe via Syria, and the other to pass through Arabia to Egypt and tropical Africa. In Arabia or in Egypt, it may be arose the difference between the long-headed African Negro and the rounder, shorter-headed Bushman, and the last name becoming more habited than his congeners, to the life and arise, in the arid deserts or scrubby open country. The African Negro was again differentiated probably in Eastern Africa into three main varieties. Okay, I'm going to say something and then I'm going to read something. Okay, so where it's talking about the Syrians and everything like that, the Syrians are the children of Aram. They are where Rebecca, the mother of Jacob and Esau, she's Syrian. As are Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah. They're all Syrians. They all come from the house of Bethel, which he is a Syrian. He's an Aramite. And we're going to read this part down here at the bottom. The Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. The Asiatic Negro strain, shown itself occasionally in curly hair and long eyes, proportionate of the skull. Jewish hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica and Guyana reproduce most strikingly to the Assyrian type. It is quite conceivable that the great peninsula of Arabia was once populated, as far as its natural conditions allowed, by a primitive Negro stock, which may have been later or partially exterminated by changing in the unfavorable conditions of climate and by the aftercoming of the white man and his types. So when people say that the reason we're doing all this scholarship is because when people say that people look a certain way and they don't look a certain way, like, it doesn't matter. If these people look like Asian people, I'll be 10 toes down and telling you they look like Asian people. If these people look like white people, I'll be 10 toes down and tell you that they look like white people. If these people look like, whatever kind of people, I will be 10 toes down and tell you these people look the way that they do. We're doing scholarship. We've barely used any scripture to prove it. Some people are like, well, you can't just prove that look in scripture. You can. But if you want to do scholarship, here it is. They're telling you this is 1910. Slavery's ended less than 50 years ago. This is what they're writing about these people. Okay, we're going to keep going from here. And I have a point as we're establishing this as well. Okay, so we're going to read right here. We're going to skip down. So we're going to do the people that were indigenous to the Canary Islands right here at this part right here. We're going to just read a little bit of that. Besides also recalcitrant Moorish Jews, because remember we already discussed what Moors were. Moorish Jews from Majorca, Jews from Moresco from southern Spain. The Turks and Arabs in the Crusades and the Moors of Spain and the North Africa had introduced to the mind of medieval Europe the idea of the Negro slaves of black Moors, who were strong, willing, faithful servants to their white employers. Although more enslaved Christian and Christian attempted to enslave more, from the 8th to the 18th century, neither found it a paying game. The two races were too near akin mentally and physically and too nearly equal in endowments to reign over each other. Because remember, we were talking about previously, a lot of these people were darker complected people. The original Spaniards and Portuguese and all these people were very dark people. Okay? So I'm explaining to you what's happening. So pretty much what was going on was the Moors and the Spaniards are selling each other back and forth, and it's not profitable. Because they think too similarly and they look alike. At that time, not what people look like today. Okay? So then, this is what happens. When the Portuguese discoverers, urged by Prince Harry of Portugal, had rounded Cape Bojador after reaching Rio de Oro in 1435, had in 1441 captured some Moors on that desert coast and brought them back to Portugal to become his slaves. The latter soon attracted the attention of Portuguese nobilities by their noble bearing. They explained that it was impossible for persons of their race and religion to pass into servitude, and they would either die of a broken heart or commit suicide. On the other hand, there was a race Cursed by God, the race of Ham and Canaan, the black-skinned people who were predestined slaves who dwelt in enormous numbers to the south of the great desert. If their Portuguese captors would release them, talking about the Moors of the Sahara coast, they would show the Christians the way to the river of the crocodiles and seahorses in the south by which they dwelt. The black people who might justifiably be conveniently more imported as slaves into Portugal. The offer was accepted at the close of the 15th century. Okay? This is how it started. They were like, we can't keep enslaving these people. But what we can do is we can set them free. And when they set them free, these people took them to another people. They said, okay, you let us go free. We got some people for you. And they tell them that they're cursed by God. I'm using God for a reason. They're saying they're cursed by God. And then they tell them that they're of the race of Ham and Canaan. Which I'm not saying that there aren't mixtures in there. But these people were cursed. Which is why they go into captivity. But they're not of the race of Ham and Canaan for the most part. I'm not saying they weren't intermixed in there. But that's not who these people were. So then we're going to keep reading. And Gaunch, I think Ganche, in appearance must have been very like the white Moors of North Africa at the present day, and not very dissimilar to the southern Spaniards. The names of some of these rather notable Gauch immigrants linger, actually the names of the villages and plantations in Cuba, Haiti, Santo Domingo at the present day. This Tingara, the name of an American sugar plantation managed by the Englishmen in Cuba, is the name of a Ganche chieftain sent as a slave or a prisoner of war to Cuba. The Canary Islanders in Spanish America are referred to as the Isleños. This is the reason why blackamoor in English, and you can look that word up and you'll see different figurines that are always in service. A blackamoor in English, Morion in Dutch, Morion in German, Moro in Portuguese, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, and Morical in French were early names for Negroes. Negro, a Spanish word, did not come into common English until the 19th century. Okay, so after a while, these Moors, some of them aren't as dark as some of the other ones, and they're like selling each other, and then they come up with a plan. They're going to get these people off the west coast of Africa. All right, we're going to keep going. All right, trade in Negro slaves was being carried by the Portuguese between the Guinea coast and the Mediterranean Europe. Lagos in southern Portugal becoming a very great slave mart. According to Brian Edwards, the Portuguese obtained about in 1475 a bull, meaning like an edict pretty much from the Pope, sanctioning the African slave trade. Early popes had forbidden the traffic. A slave market was set up at Lisbon, at which from 10,000 to 12,000 Negroes were sold annually in the 16th century. Does it say anything about millions? Does it say even more than 20,000 per year? And this is just going. Okay, all right, we're going to keep reading. But it was the Pope who decided that it was okay to do slavery. And we'll discuss when we get to Christianity why Christianity was a proponent for slavery. Okay. In course in time, this Ascencio became the contract for supplying Spanish Indies with Negroes, an increasingly profitable enterprise which figures often in European and American history during the 17th and 18th century. During the closing years of the reign of Charles, he turned against the principle of slavery for Indian or Negro. He promulgated the Code of 1542 for the better protection of the Amerindians of Spanish America, and directed that all African slaves should be set free. Pedro de la Casca was sent out to carry this emancipation into effect. But 1 year after retirement of Charles to the monastery of Yuste, slavery in the slave trade was resumed. Sometimes these contractors of the Ascencio passed on a portion of their privilege to subcontractors. Thus, in 1562, the British sea captain John Hawkins, later Sir John, took up a contract of the supply of slaves from Guinea to the Canary Islands, or direct to Antilles. In 1562, 1564, 1567, he made 3 ventures on the west coast of Africa, Gambia, Sierra Leone, western Liberia, and the Gold Coast, in the course of which he purchased or ... And then it talks about the Queen Elizabeth of that time, of the 1500s, and things, how they were all participating in it. But you notice right here it says the Negro and the Indian, because they were enslaving both of them. Just saying. Okay. Is there anything else? I think that's it. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Okay, to sum up the House of Shem, these are some books that you might want to read just to get some insight on some things. I've never read Hebrews and Negroes. I've watched one of the documentaries, but it was pretty decent. And I have read Babylon Timbuktu and The Bible is Black Men's History book. The Bible is Black Men's History book is very interesting because it was written by, I think he's a prince off the west coast of Africa. And he was talking about the customs and everything of his people and how, not to be a spoiler, but that's something that actually you should probably look into as well, if you can find it. So, all right. All right, so we're gonna keep going with this. All right, we're gonna read these definitions again, and then we're gonna put a little bit of context to it, and then we'll be done with this particular one, and then we'll go on to the next one and just make our way through that. All right, so again, Moor is the definition of a Moor. It says North African Berber, one of the race dwelling in Barbary, the late 14th century, from the Old French more, from the medieval Latin Moris, from Latin Moris, inhabitant of Mauritania, Roman Northwest Africa, a region now corresponding to northern Algeria and Morocco. You see how it has more in there. From Greeks, Moros, perhaps a native name, or else cognated with Moros, meaning black. But this adjective appears in late Greek and many as well to be from the people's names. And then down here it says also applied to the Arabic conquerors of Spain being dark people in relation to Europeans. The names of the Middle Ages is shown synonymous for Negro. Later, being the names of the nearest Muslims of the Western Europe, in which was used indiscriminately of Muslims, Persians, Arabs, but especially those in India. Cognate with Dutch Moor, German Moor, Danish Morar, Spanish Moro, Italian Moro, and related Mores. Okay, now we're going to go to the next one. All right, back to this one. Negro. And these are the etymology of these words. The 1500s, a member of the black skin race of Africa from Spanish or Portuguese. Negro meaning black from Latin. Negrum. Nominative, niger or nigger. Black, dark, sable, dusky. Applied to the night sky or a storm. The complexion figuratively gloomy, unlucky, bad, wicked. See how all these other words have been applied to it. According to the Devan, the word unknown etymology, according to Watkins, perhaps. We're going to skip that. The Latin word also applies to the black peoples of Africa, but the usual terms were Ethiopies or Afar. Now we're going to go down here to this little purplish blue section. Professor Booker T. Washington being politely interrogated as to whether Negroes ought to be called Negroes or members of the colored race, because Negroes and colored people are not the same. has replied it has long been his own practice to write and speak of members of his race as Negroes, or when using the term Negroes as a race designation to employ the capital N. And we'll talk about Booker T. Washington and people like him when we get to a particular section. Meaning, we're going to go down to the bottom. African American vernacular, the English language as spoken by U.S. blacks from 1704. French nègre or nègre is a 16th century borrowing from the Spanish Negro. Older words were Moor or blackamoor, a Middle English word for Ethiopian. Perhaps also a Negro, generally a blue man or a blue man, like the dark black, purplish blue, dark black people. Because like I said, not the same people. Okay, and then we're gonna, but you notice right here, it was asking him, they were asking him a distinction between a Negro and a colored person. Just saying. All right, so we're gonna go right here. So these are Moors. And you see his skin is a dark brown, but some of them were just as black as this figurine were. All right, we're gonna come back to tawny. Tawny means tan colored, especially brown with dark or dull yellowish orange. Mild, tawny, 14th century, mid 14th century. Tawny, late 13th century as a surname from Anglo-French tonne, of or like the brownish yellow of tan leather, from the Old French tanne, dark brown, tan, 12th century modern French, tanne, past participle of tannere or tanner, to tan hides, from medieval Latin tannere. Also as a noun, a tawny color, mid 14th century, a colonial British English, sometimes brown skinned person, 1650s, related to tawniness. And then we're also going to look at this one right here. This is red cent, a type of copper penny. In 1839, American English from red, or red cent, pure copper pennies, and then it talks about when they were issued, right? But let's see. Red has been the color of copper, brass, or gold since ancient times. And there's a reason we're looking at red cent. So we're going back to this again. Brown, dusky, dark, or dusky color, inclining to redness. But the shades are various, as the Spanish brown, London brown, clove brown, tawny brown results from a mixture of red, black, and yellow. And then we're going to read down here. Red men, red people, red children, the aboriginals of America as distinguished from the whites. These are a red people. These are a copper colored people in the Americas. And if you look at this chart right here with these pennies, you see this copper penny has a variety of colors. It can go from a lighter, redder complexion to a darker, browner complexion, but it's not even limited to the different variations that are on this chart. It can find itself even lighter or even darker than what's on this chart as well. And then this is just another one for reference. And we made it through it. All right, on to the next one.